Hello, Jack.
Hello, Sam.
Welcome everyone. Welcome back to The Tempest.
Yeah, welcome to Season 2 of The Tempest.
That's what we're calling it. That's what we're calling a long hiatus.
Yeah, it was completely intentional. We were transitioning to our second season.
Yeah, we thought that through and decided let's not do episodes for a very long time as we're growing in popularity.
Actually, I just thought, is this our 1-year anniversary of The Tempest?
Just about.
Yeah.
I think last week was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, happy 1 year to The Tempest.
Yes, we have been podcasting for a year, and we podcasted for 4 months of that year.
Yeah, I'd say, probably close to that. It was, our biggest month was January last year.
All right. Well, we're not gonna do that again, at least for a while.
No, we're gonna be consistent now.
Yes, we're going to suddenly change our personalities and our scheduling and make it work. But
that's right. 2 episodes a week. Get ready for it. Coming straight to your phone.
Yeah, 2 episodes a week in addition to a premium episode that will be available for all patrons on OnlyFans.
Yep. But it's $100 for that one episode.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we know what we're worth.
Anyway. Well, the reason... All right, this is the truth. The reason why there was such a long gap is because we decided that we wanted to wait for Donda to come out first, and then we'll do another podcast.
Yeah, exactly. We consider Kanye to be like a sort of patron saint of this podcast.
Yes.
Like our muse, our artistic muse.
An inspiration, a father, a brother, and a son at the same time. He is all three of those things to us.
He is the Holy Trinity.
Yes. And we decided we were going to wait, let him go first, and we'll compete with him for ratings. We'll see who does better, The Tempest or Donda. And we thought it would be appropriate to do this episode sort of in tandem as like an artistic parallel to Kanye's new album. Because we'll be talking a lot about Joe Biden, and Joe Biden is sort of the Kanye West of presidents.
Would you like to elaborate on that?
Well, I think I was listening to the album when I walk over to your apartment, and the lyric, they said Adam could never be a black man because a black man would never give up his rib. I was like, damn, that's such a Joe Biden-ass thing to say. Like, if Joe Biden was a 25-year-old black man, he would say that.
You think so?
Yeah. I think that his decision in Afghanistan is very, Joe Biden... Because let's face it, he probably, because he was Obama's VP, sees himself as a black man anyway. He thinks that by proxy, he's black now. And
in the same way that Bill Clinton was.
Yes. It's since Bill Clinton, every president has been black. All right, but anyway.
Yeah, you're not even going to explain that one. You're just going to keep moving on.
No, well, except George Bush. George Bush was white, but the past 3 presidents have been black. Anyway, without further ado, we're going to talk about so far the only thing of consequence Joe Biden has done in office.
Yeah, this is the big one. This is the one that's getting all the media coverage, got everyone worked up, and it's the first one that people actually feel like, oh, this is a departure from Obama, a departure from Trump. This is Joe Biden's first policy that you can look at and say, hey, this is Joe Biden. This is all Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Because we go back to 2011. Joe Biden was saying we should pull out of Afghanistan.
We should. Yeah. To be clear, that issue is Afghanistan.
Yes, of course.
There's
nothing else we would be talking about at this point.
Yes,
it takes a big event to pull us out of our hiatus, and that's A, Kanye dropping Donda, or B, the U.S. pulls out of Afghanistan.
Yeah, the end of the longest war in our history.
Yeah, exactly. And who better to do that than Joe Biden, I guess.
I think that this is the best thing a president has done since the Civil Rights Act. Like, and in addition to that, well, I guess if you want to count ending the war in Vietnam,
Yeah.
um, uh, and again, I think that this is like a really unique time in like the history of the American presidency because obviously we've made it clear we do not believe in great man of history theory, either of us, and
Yep.
as we both like understand that presidents are usually constrained by institutions and sort of are subjects of history rather than creating their own history, and they're really constrained by the present existing, material structures, institutions, and all of that. And if you look throughout presidential history, you'll see like that holds pretty true. But every once in a while, like the individual personalities of presidents actually matter. And this is very much Joe Biden, it's not about like the institutions or anything. He seems to be doing this entirely unilaterally, which he's allowed to do legally.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
yeah, and this is like Joe Biden doing it because like Joe Biden, I believe he genuinely believes it. He's not doing it to score political points or anything. I think if anything, he'd probably be better off if he like politically if he stayed in. I think the way the media is spinning it as a total disaster, which it isn't.
Yeah, well, that's yes and no about him being better off because on the one hand, you do have a very large media pundit class that is opposed to the like withdrawal from Afghanistan, and that's like a very popular sentiment is like, oh no, this is so terrible. But then you also see like a massive chunk of the American population is kind of like, yeah, this we want out. Like I know there's going to be a cost to it. I know that like U.S. soldiers are going to be like withdrawing from the area. There's going to be like refugee crisis, but they just want to leave. They don't want to have us fighting and like doing state construction exercises in Afghanistan for another 10, 20, 30 years, so on and indefinitely because we have been there already for 20
Yeah.
years. Basically our entire lives, the U.S. has been at war
Yeah.
in Afghanistan.
I think I sort of think people always try to say that Trump represented like the everyman, the average white working class Joe, and that's like total like not true. That's like he represents the average beautiful voter. But no, I think the average working person, even though Joe Biden like is like not like he is more representative of like what average middle America like thinks and feels because on one hand, the American voters can be a very bloodthirsty people.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. But I think time and time again, history has shown like they're not into nation building at all. They don't want to do that. Didn't want to do it with Iraq. They didn't want to do it with Afghanistan. There's always been sort of like this undercurrent of like not anti-war sentiment, but anti. Long war sentiment. Yeah. I think American voters, they just want to know that they have the military that can kick anyone's ass at any time. And they wanted revenge after 9/11, and they wanted to fight Saddam because he's been our enemy for like a decade or so. And they just want to be able to wipe the floor with any opponent, but they don't want to like ever deal with the consequences of of doing so.
Yeah, and that's again like what it came down to isn't the fact that like we went into Afghanistan in the first place. The withdrawal was always going to be messy, but it would have been the same mess 15 years ago as it is now. Actually, probably would have been better 15 years ago to withdraw. But yeah, as I was saying, it's like we already wiped the floor with Afghanistan. People don't want us to stick around.
Yeah, and that's sort of like that's the worst. The reaction to this of like, as you said, the pundit class that's like trying to like spin this as the greatest tragedy since ever, and you see like the so-called like moderate and liberal like media just going full sounding exactly like Bush people did in 2002, just like absolutely insane and bloodthirsty. But the worst kind of people are the people that have you believe like, no, if we stayed for 21 years, this would have been completely different.
Yeah, it's like, oh no, we should withdraw, but we should do it this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's fake. That's not true. It's like you either withdraw or you don't. Joe Biden withdrew. That's it. This is what a withdrawal would look like. There is no world in which you defeat the Taliban and leave. There's no world in which like the government of Afghanistan you train and like build up to fight the Taliban. And that's something I think we should definitely get into later, is discussing like the role of the Taliban in all of this and like how they play into like the new nation building that we're going to be seeing in Afghanistan. But there is no other way to pull out of a country other than pull out, whether that's like evacuating US citizens or any of that. This is just how it's going to go. There are going to be people left behind. There are going to be refugees. That's going to happen no matter what. And so the only alternative is to stay. There is no other pulling out.
Yeah, yeah. And like, as you know, as recently deceased civil rights icon Donald Rumsfeld, he like that type of like politician, those, you know, Pentagon bureaucrats, like they were honest about it. They were like, yes, we will have to stay for like all of time if we want like this to work. Like just stay for centuries, never leave. But like the liberal hawk-ish type person are the people that are saying, no, we only needed one extra year, like, or whatever. Biden's just doing it too early. It doesn't matter how long we stayed. The country was always going to become like re-Taliban. Like, as sad as that might be, that's just the way it is. You know, there was no other way for this to go down. Mm-hmm. It was the same thing with when we left Saigon, and I know a lot of people are making that comparison. I think there's a bit of a difference between the North Vietnamese army and the Taliban.
Yeah.
But
well, I was going to say, when people refer to the fall of Saigon, and I think that's a very interesting phrase to use, the fall of Saigon. What you mean is the reunification of Vietnam.
The liberation of Saigon would be a more apt term.
There's the understanding of the Vietnam conflict as, well, something that the U.S. lost is true. Like, yes, the U.S. lost it, but they didn't lose it on the behalf of anyone other than, like, ourselves. It wasn't like, oh no, our poor South Vietnamese government that like we worked so hard to establish this thriving democracy that we promoted. Oh no, it's gone to the
to the bloodthirsty communists.
Yeah, no, that's not a thing. The U.S. it's the same thing with Korea, but that's still going. It's you split the country in half. You like put in place an authoritarian kleptocracy and just keep supporting it in the name of anti-communism, and then are surprised when the people rise up and overthrow your puppet regime. That's not the fall of Saigon. That's Vietnamese liberation.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And for what it's worth, we're comparing the two. Like, you know, it's pretty... and again, this is sort of like proves to me that Joe Biden, like... is acting totally independently and is only doing this because he believes it in his heart. To compare, like, leaving Vietnam to leaving Afghanistan is also insane, because, like, Richard Nixon, like, knew he was going to leave, but decided, like, I'm going to spend 4 years bombing the country to smithereens before I do so. Whereas Joe Biden's doing this very early in his term. Like, you know, like, we're not even a year into his presidency. Yeah, he has 3 years to, like, to deal with whatever repercussions might arise from doing this.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think getting to like Afghanistan, I think it's important to like talk about the context. And I want to be upfront. I am not like a Middle East scholar. That's not my regional focus. But I did just rewatch Rambo 3, so I get the gist.
I was going to say, we are not Middle East scholars or experts, but neither are the people who have been covering the war for the past 20 years.
This is very true.
And guess what? Now that this is over, they might talk about how terrible it is, but give it a month, they're going to forget about it. And suddenly they're going to become experts on another country that we can try to occupy for 20 years. They're going to all become China experts or Russia experts or whatever.
Yeah, well, we've already seen the pivot to China already, but yeah. So I guess to discuss like the context of this, and specifically like the Taliban I think if we want to understand the origins of the war in Afghanistan, as with any war the U.S. has fought in the last century, it's important to recognize who we gave guns to 40 years ago. And in that case, it is the Mujahideen of Afghanistan. They were guerrillas basically fighting against the Soviet Union and the communists.
Right. It's worth also noting that a lot of people are saying we're going to leave all the women behind and women's rights are going to go away. In the Soviet-controlled parts of Afghanistan, that was like the only time in recent history where women had full autonomy and equality. Yeah. And just saying.
And an interesting thing to do, if you care about like human rights and especially like the rights of women, is to go into the Wikipedia page on women's suffrage and look at the date that women gained suffrage in like a variety of countries like China, Afghanistan, what are some of the other big ones, like Russia, just an assortment of countries. And most of the time it's when the communists take over that women gain basically legal autonomy and the right to vote in a lot of these cases.
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. In Cuba, China, I think Russia's the greatest example. Like how women and ethnic minorities were treated in Tsarist Russia, like truly terrifying. And but I digress.
Yeah, but anyway, back to Afghanistan. So yeah, you had the communists and all that intervention in the region. Before that, you had the British, of course. Graveyard of empires, as it's called.
Yeah, everybody that goes there like loses.
Yeah, exactly. There's no good way to put it other than if you're occupying Afghanistan for any extended period of time, or at least even fighting a war in there, things aren't going to go great for you.
Didn't things go poorly for the Romans too when they like?
I don't know. I'm not a classics guy.
I probably though.
Yeah,
it stands to reason.
Yeah.
But anyway, getting back to the origins of the Taliban and how...
Yeah, so of course there were these guerrilla fighters fighting against like the USSR and the communists, and being the brave soldiers that they were, the US of course sends the CIA and the State Department to like back these guys and give them guns, give them assistance, financial assistance.
Charlie Wilson's War is a movie with Tom Hanks, and there's a brilliant performance by Philip Seymour Hoffman in it. Playing like a CIA agent that like takes no nonsense, and I think it's Julia Roberts plays like a far right socialite that and Tom Hanks is a congressman who basically gets the Mujahideen the capabilities to shoot down Soviet helicopters, and the last scene of the movie is like Tom Hanks being like, all right, now that the Soviets are out, we need to spend the money to give the Afghan children to help them build schools. And all the other congressmen are like, nah, I don't want to spend the money to build a school. And like what they're trying to say is like that's what caused 9/11. Because it's just crazy that a movie like that came out after 9/11. It was written by that freak Aaron Sorkin.
Oh, of course it was. Yeah. But,
yeah.
Yeah, and so then the general idea is, of course, once you kick the Soviets out and arm a guerrilla resistance, and then there's no one there, you tend to get a lot of terrorist groups, and hence you get Taliban, and then, of course, Al-Qaeda comes out of that, and then, lo and behold, we get to 9/11.
Yeah, there's an infamous New York Times article, like, literally profiling Osama bin Laden, and, the headline is, like, anti-Soviet warrior must now set the course for peace.
Yeah. And it's just a direct through line from these events of like the U.S. intervention and like arming of the Mujahideen to the Taliban to Al Qaeda to 9/11, and then of course we turn to Afghanistan.
Yeah, and it's important to note that like people tend to forget this because Iraq happened right after, and there was just zero correlation between Iraq and 9/11. But the evidence that Afghanistan was like heavily involved in 9/11 is pretty flimsy as well. And basically, if the U.S. wanted to actually avenge 9/11, the only suitable country to invade was Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, and that wasn't going to happen because they're our friends.
Yes, they're our friends.
Friendly oil producers.
Our friends did 9/11. Like, that's... closer to home than you would think. But that's a different podcast topic. But anyway, yeah. So, and also I think it's worth mentioning after 9/11, the U.S. turns its sights towards Afghanistan, and Iraq is like on the back burner too. Though, like I don't think people always say, "Oh, you support the war in Afghanistan, but not the war in Iraq." I think like the both were always going to happen together. Donald Rumsfeld, civil rights hero, rest in peace, complained that Afghanistan was like a bad country to invade because there weren't any good targets there, and that's why he wanted to invade Iraq. And so, sort of like the two countries were always like on the same dinner plate. Like, there's no way you get one without the other. Yeah. I think like that's very clear. So it's important to note that when you talk about opposition to the Afghanistan war, because opposing the Iraq war is like popular, it's accepted, but if you oppose the Afghanistan war, people still think, oh well, what did you want them to get away with 9/11? Like, no. Let's not forget Osama was found in his house in Pakistan.
Yep.
Another ally, just to be clear.
Yeah. And well, with the difference even between like Afghanistan and Iraq, of course Iraq had Saddam Hussein. Like, oh, we already know he's a bad guy, so that's kind of put a gun to most people's head. They could not name who was in charge of Afghanistan at any point in the last 30 years.
Oh, no, you couldn't. I don't think today most people could name like any leader or members of the Taliban, higher ups.
Yeah, exactly. But of course, we did still invade, and unlike Iraq, which did have like an actual military that engaged in combat, Afghanistan was like pure counterinsurgency for like 20 years. That was all fighting against like the Taliban, and then eventually ISIS wasn't quite in Afghanistan, right? It was
no. ISIS-K is there now.
Yeah,
but no, ISIS was
the Delta ISIS, the Delta variant.
And like the Delta variant, they're made up by the CIA. I'm kidding, but like Afghanistan like doesn't really have was not really by any means a conventional country. Like the Taliban was like not really even a legitimate like government if it meets any of the qualifications.
Like what? It's a dozen different tribes, tribal associations, governments, that organize or represent this very unstructured region, which then calls to question about like the United States tries to set up this government, works on it for quite a while, and then we leave, and how long does it take to fall apart?
Less than any weeks, less I mean, it's over now. They immediately dropped their guns and fled, and they outnumbered the Taliban 3-1, and they were supposedly trained by the U.S. I think the only reason for this is because the Taliban made deals with most of the institutions that the U.S. created, and that's a big reason why.
Yeah.
I think the Taliban, they also always knew that they were just going to come right back in as soon as the U.S. left, and I think now they want to put themselves on the path to where they're no longer just a loose conglomerate, but they're an actual government that receives actual legitimacy.
And it's important to recognize throughout this entire process, the reason that the Taliban is seen as a terrorist organization is they've been essentially separated from the government. In forming a government coalition, the United States pretty arbitrarily decided, the Taliban has no place in this government. They can't be a governing party. They can't work with us for any of this. And so they've been cut out of negotiations for the vast majority of the history of the war in Afghanistan, which is one of the reasons why leading up to this, they have been a militant organization. They haven't been a governmental entity. They haven't been a sort of structured opposition in the same way we would see in a parliamentary system. No, they have been largely anti-government or against the constructed government because they were kicked out of it. They were not allowed to participate in the civic institutions that were being constructed. So they have no other means of influencing regional and local politics other than through their own organization. They were created to be an enemy of the government by the way it was structured.
Yes.
And that's one of the biggest problems with looking at this now is oh, the Taliban, they're like outside of the peaceful process of like politics. Well, that's because they were separated from it, and I think it wouldn't be wrong to say that if they had been institutionalized into the existing government, there's a chance it would have succeeded and actually been able to have been maintained in the longer term, because these violent opposition forces were essentially made to participate in peaceful government.
Yes, a perfect example of this is like the month before we invaded, the Taliban was like, "We can give you Bin Laden, and
Yeah.
we don't negotiate with terrorists." So like, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to deny too many CIA narratives on the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so that brings us to, like, of course, the U.S. created the government, tried to create democracy, held elections, all of that, and yeah, from our bird's eye view over in the States, many thousands of miles away, it's like, oh yeah, there's a government now. Would you look at that? They have security forces, they have a president, all of that. But then we decide our work here is done, so we leave.
Yeah, we have plenty of other places to get opium. We can it's time to go home.
Yeah, and the minute we do, within the week, the Taliban has seized the bulk of the territory in Afghanistan. The president has fled the country.
There's videos of them, like the Taliban, like working out,
Yeah.
like playing with like gym equipment and
Yeah,
like
there's
dancing.
the pictures of them getting ice cream. They're
Yeah.
doing bumper cars at one of the local.
And yeah, which is really weird because they just outlawed music again.
Did they?
I think yeah, they
Is that a
just
thing?
yeah, that was yes, that was the thing before the invasion and afterward, and they're doing it again. But they are announcing some things like women can leave the house alone,
Yeah.
which is great.
Yeah.
Take note, feminists. The Taliban's woke now.
They
Must be all that critical race theory.
they did guarantee safe passage out of the country for all U.S. personnel
Yes,
and
yes.
U.S. I guess people that worked with the U.S. They did guarantee that.
They had nothing to do with the deaths of the 13 Marines, was it?
Yeah.
That just occurred, which were the first U.S. deaths since Biden started the withdrawal.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, since February, I want to say. Is that what it was?
yeah, I don't know that. I just know that like up until then there had been 0 casualties from on the U.S. side since withdrawing, and I think that is an accomplishment in of itself. And while any loss of life is like saddening, and we honor the U.S. military and their bravery and their sacrifice. Those 13 Marines are like objectively, since the invasion, the only U.S. soldiers that did not die in vain.
Yeah.
Since like they're the only ones whose deaths served a higher purpose. That it's a tragic loss of life in ending an evil and unjust war. That it's great that we're finally coming home, and that was a sacrifice worth making.
And sort of in that vein, the use of these Marines as like a sort of, I guess, basically a political tool to justify the reoccupation. What do you think happens when we reoccupy Afghanistan? Thousands of more U.S. soldiers are going to die if you come back.
Yeah,
Why would you?
Yeah.
Why would you hold these deaths up as a reason that we need to continue fighting in this war? I think, an entirely unnecessary death in a lot of ways, because we should have left so much sooner.
Yes, and to the media class, like they did not care. I think now we should sort of turn to the domestic side of things, to Joe Biden and the response. Because like I said, it's really a historical thing. You sometimes after the Obama and Trump presidencies, and there was a lot of gridlock because of rival parties being in control of Congress. So sometimes it's easy to forget how powerful the president can act unilaterally on certain things. And like I said, the British Parliament voted to censure Joe Biden over it. That he's receiving condemnation from everything, but he's doing it totally unilaterally. And this is one of the few instances in history or the individual personality of a president greatly matters,
Yeah.
because this is like Joe Biden. Like I said, he's not, like he's not woke or anti-war in any capacity. He's not like going to his administration and being like, imperialism, it's the highest stage of capitalism, Jack. We gotta, he's not. He has no good. He was like the staunchest Democrat supporter of the Iraq War. I think he totally whipped the Democratic Party into supporting it.
And I think that's a great way to characterize a lot of these Joe Biden figures that are like in the moderate Democratic wing. Is they're pro-war, but anti-occupation.
Yeah. In 2011, he told Obama, he was like, I don't want my son risking his life for women's rights in Afghanistan. That is sort of like the mindset of like your typical like older, like, what are we getting out of this? Why are we doing this? We're not getting anything. We're not, really, we don't understand the Taliban. Most people don't get it. Like what? Like they won't let they kill women if they like speak out of turn. That's terrible and awful, but like it's not our fight. And that's why sort of like I think most Americans probably feel that way. And I think that's why Joe Biden, in like his like old-timey silliness, he thinks like he embodies sort of like the mindset of like middle America so much better than fancy lad soft boy Donald Trump.
And so far as like this is like the populist or the most popular, like, I guess, path forward of like withdrawing from Afghanistan completely and totally, Trump wanted to do that, but he didn't have
the
balls.
Backbone. Yeah, the generals convinced him not to. Like the National Security Council, the Joint Chiefs, the deep state, the people that were supposed to believe Donald Trump was fighting for 4 years, talked him out of it. And Joe Biden comes in. He has no domestic policy achievements. He has absolutely nothing else going for. He was just like, fuck it. Tell him Kamala did it. That's the funniest part of all this, is like he's trying to like, Kamala, you're gonna go take care of this, right? Go on out there, and she's like, no, because he already put her in charge of the border, which is another perfect example of something that's like an unwinnable, unsolvable situation that like will never be fixed.
Yeah, well, what is it? There was like was it The Atlantic reported that like they overheard coming from the Oval Office or something, Kamala saying like, you can't do this to me.
Yeah,
you can't pin this one on me.
She said,
Joe.
you're not fucking pinning this on me.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I guess she thinks that like the media coverage of it will inhibit her own presidential ambitions, whether that's in 2024 or 2028. Because Biden seems to think he's going to do 2 terms, but he's the only person that thinks he's going to do 2 terms. And Kamala's fighting her own, unpopularity. She's like the least popular vice president in like
really?
decades.
You didn't see her incredibly successful trip to Southeast Asia this week?
Oh my God! Don't even get me started. When she went to Vietnam and went to a John McCain memorial or something.
Well, actually, wasn't it like not even a memorial? It was actually like a celebration of where they shot down his plane or something like that.
Yeah, I know it was more of a memorial to the Vietnamese for all of the Vietnamese people John McCain killed.
Yeah.
And she went there and started. I'm trying to think of like what an equivalent for it would be, like going to Turkey and being like, and we're gonna remember Vlad the Impaler, who.
Or if you had a memorial to the Ukrainians that bravely served in the war against communism.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and here are the Wehrmacht volunteers who put down their lives to save us from communist oppression.
Yeah.
But
that brings us back to like how this has been, and I have a hard time saying it was a clean withdrawal. I'd say there have been logistical issues, certainly, in getting the U.S. diplomats out of the country, and the whole idea that we're accidentally leaving people in Kabul and not getting our translators back the way we should. But from what you are hearing in like the U.S. pundit circle, you would think that like the Taliban kicked down the doors of the embassy and just like murdered tons of Americans. It's not like even a hostage situation. It's none of that. Like, as far as we know, the only casualties have been like the Marines that died in the recent bombing, and those 13.
From the U.S. side.
Yeah, from the U.S.
The Afghanistan.
Yeah, on the Afghanistan side, in that same bombing, I should note that it was over 68 people were killed.
Yes,
and that's something that's never reported in this whole entire war, is the number of Afghan people that have died under the U.S. occupation. And that's important to keep in mind through all of this, is that it is well beyond hundreds of thousands at this point.
Yes, and to Trump's credit, you can sort of make the argument that Joe Biden is just continuing the path that Trump put us on. Because in February of 2020, he did negotiate a ceasefire with the Taliban, but he made no stipulation in that ceasefire about, he said stop killing U.S. troops, but he didn't do anything like stop killing Afghani civilians. He didn't give a fig about them.
Yeah.
Which but Joe Biden's putting America first. He's fighting the deep state, and frankly, now I'm worried that the CIA might try to assassinate him.
Yeah, you think they still do that? I mean, I thought they came a little close to getting found out with JFK.
Well, I think JFK proved that they're willing to do it.
Oh, okay.
And if you're willing to kill the president, I think you're willing to do it again. And also, Kamala Harris is sort of like an LBJ-esque figure, where she's you just help me get reelected and I'll give you your war, which is exactly what LBJ said to the people that did the coup to kill JFK.
Yeah, it is interesting to see Joe Biden dealing with a messy U.S. withdrawal, and then also tensions rising as far as Cuba.
That is true. A lot of people are saying we're just finding another country to occupy for 20 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, but after all, in U.S. foreign policy, isn't it just a cycle of invasion and occupation, withdrawal, and then tensions with Cuba?
And losing wars is also.
We have been very good at that for the last.
Yeah, the only war we've won since World War II is what, the Persian Gulf War?
No, Grenada.
Right, of course. Oh, I can't forget Panama either.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, but no, Korea stalemate, Vietnam loss, Iraq.
It was a tie.
Iraq was a loss because he wanted to turn it into a neoliberal capitalist paradise, and it's not that.
Yeah.
And Afghanistan is also a loss. So I think those are the four major conflicts.
What about the Balkans? There's no winning in the Balkans.
Yeah, that wasn't a war. That was just mass slaughter.
Yeah, that was intervening in ethnic cleansing.
Yeah.
More so than an actual war.
Yeah, that was not. That doesn't count. And to get back to again, 13 dead Americans, always a sad thing. But the way that the media is framing it is that Marines are just being beheaded in ISIS-style videos by the Taliban, and that's just not the case at all. This is like I said, this is the best thing a president has done since the Civil Rights Act or ending the Vietnam War. It's really a huge victory, and I've never said two nice words about Joe Biden before, but I'm saying them now. I think this really just goes to show this is a triumph of his will as an individual, because he's doing this totally unilaterally. He's doing it, based on his own instincts and opinions, and you're looking at your phone. That looks like CNN. Is that related to the podcast?
It is. I was just seeing that in the sort of aftermath of the Marines dying, of course, there was recently another drone strike or a missile strike done to prevent another similar attack, but that also ended up killing 9 civilian family members, including 6 children.
Oh, of course.
Of course, on the way out, we can't hold back from this sort of brutality.
Yeah, we can't appear to look weak. The empire has to maintain the facade of, all-encompassing strength.
Yeah.
We should probably talk about all the people who are saying that all the political science, international politics people that are saying this is causing them trauma.
Yeah, I was gonna say all the political science major, Arabic minor.
Yeah, all the people that like are saying that like they have PTSD because we lost a war. Like, yeah, that crowd, the people that are saying like this is a traumatic experience, because they're the ones that have been writing about why the war is necessary for 20 years, and seeing it fall through. And like to the younger generation of like millennial bloodthirsty psychopaths that like want a never-ending U.S. empire, like to that I say, you're gonna be fine when season 2 of Loki comes out. Like you're gonna forget about this immediately, like because yeah, I would say these people are either like the most evil or naive people on the planet, and you can't tell like which one. Like Dick Cheney doesn't believe his own bullshit. He doesn't care about the nuance or the rhetoric. But these people, all these like liberal interventionist, poli-sci Arabic minor, like Pete Buttigieg's of the world, seem to really believe that like there's a way that the United States can like be a force for good while also being the world's policeman in the front man for capitalism.
Yeah, no, and I think that in the same way that Vietnam was engineered by the best and the brightest of the political science community, so too was, well, Iraq and Afghanistan. It's the recovery and nation building was the pride of our intellectual, I guess, tradition of trying to build countries, and it didn't work. We're still bad at it.
Yeah, that is interesting distinction, because there is the rift between right-wing national security poli-sci freaks versus liberal ones, and sort of like I think the Obama-Bush distinction is a great example, because like their foreign policies were more or less the same, but you have George Bush, who's this like Larry the Cable Guy-esque figure of like just the cowboy waving his pistols around. And Obama sort of tried to embody that, the same Kennedy-esque best and the brightest,
Yeah, it's your Sorkin.
Yes,
folks. It's like
exactly.
All of these people in the State Department are pulled straight out of like a Sorkin script that are like hyper competent technocrats.
Yes.
And we wanted them running the wars instead of the neocons that were a little bit more blunt. Of course, we see our boy John Bolton coming back onto the scene to talk about how we need to go back.
Yeah, like a guy who was just 2 years ago, like, further, like, seen as, like, more dangerous than, like, Dick Cheney, and, like, considered unhinged by, like, neocon.
Well, let's be honest, he is.
Absolutely, but, like, just the fact that, like, and yeah, he is absolutely unhinged, and people have been saying he's unhinged since fucking Bush picked him to be UN ambassador or whatever, and yet now suddenly he's supposed to be the voice of reason on Afghanistan. Like, this just is like the media, like, in their own insanity, just like ends up gaslighting themselves in an attempt to gaslight the entire American population. Into like, we just said John Bolton was an insane psychopath for 4 years, but he's also an expert on Afghanistan and someone we should listen to.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't agree with Trump on much, but he said it best when he said John Bolton was one of the dumbest people in government that he's had the pleasure to work with. He is, quote, a sullen, dull, and quiet guy. He added nothing to national security except, gee, let's go to war. And that is true. That is how I genuinely feel about John Bolton. He is a dull and sullen man that only contributes regime change policy.
Yes.
That's his solution to everything. It's, we need to solve North Korea, regime change. It's China, regime change. Afghanistan, well, there is no regime other than our own. Well, we need to change that regime into one that works. Iraq, well, he got his regime change. Same with Libya.
Yeah, and those are nice, happy, safe places.
Yes, Libya and Iraq are the glowing examples of U.S. regime change policy and proof that intervention does in fact work.
Yeah, and
think of like all the resource extraction that would not have been achieved without regime change.
And on the other side of the coin, you have the MAGA crowd who spent 4 years preaching like the America First thing, and like Trump was sort of like a unifying figure among the entire like all the factions in the Republican Party, including like the Ron Paul anti-war right wingers who are like protect our own and like don't like basically like all the anti-Semitic people that think we're doing this for Israel. Well, we are doing it for Israel, so
that's a whole nother episode.
Yeah,
Israel's
but like
a whole nother episode.
but like all the people that are right wing but also believe that the CIA deep state stuff, which like was true, but believing that Donald Trump was going to be the person to fix it, that's insane. Believing that. But anyway, all those people have just like immediately like started saying the same things about Afghanistan as John Bolton. It just proves that like they never like believed in any of that. Like they just turned into their dad.
Yeah,
like
that's the thing you said that I thought was so funny. It's like the conservatives our age, the sort of like online Trump supporters that are like, yeah, we need to do America first and all that, literally overnight turned into their dads. Like, oh well, like we actually need to invade Afghanistan. We need to like maintain our presence there because that's our moral duty.
Yeah, we need to protect Israel.
It was just flipped the switch from like the populist right to the just classic neoconservatives, like the Bush era.
Yeah, and that's all the people that are like that were like worried that neocons were gonna like give up because of Trump and infiltrate the Democratic Party again. Maybe they don't have anything to worry about.
Joe Biden just alienated all of them. Like I haven't checked up on the Lincoln Project in a while, but I wouldn't be surprised if they were running anti-Biden ads now because that was their pet project.
Yes, and like a lot of people, a lot of like neocons were like going for Biden over Trump and even Hillary over Trump because of the so-called like anti interventionist agenda that Trump claimed to have. Mm-hmm. And look how that's working out for you. Joe Biden is like, this is the best thing a president has done in my lifetime, in probably most of our listeners' lifetimes. Like Obama, like nothing. Like Trump, worse than nothing.
Yeah, and well, I think as we sort of like come to the close on like this argument, it's important to talk about who the real winners of the war in Afghanistan were. And that's going to be Lockheed Martin, that's Halliburton, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman,
Raytheon,
of course, all the big ones. What was it?
Boeing.
Yeah, Boeing. Of course, Afghanistan was the wealth redistribution policy that gave all of those companies, about $2 trillion in money over the course of 20 years, funneled directly from taxpayers to all of these military contractors.
Yes, $2 trillion, but they're still very upset that they can't kick the well anymore and, draw out a few more drops of children's blood to satiate themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And of any of the intents and purposes of this war, I think we've seen the headlines saying that Afghanistan sits on top of $1 trillion worth of rare earth minerals that we actually need.
Yeah, that the rest of humanity needs.
Oh,
and,
right.
The Afghanis must sacrifice themselves for the good of humanity, of course. Yeah.
I mean, our economic development comes first.
Yes.
We're already the richest country in the world, but we could be richer.
Yeah, and we could save the world while doing it. We just need the blood of Afghan.
Yeah. Life is good. Can be better.
Yeah. Well, why not? You can always be skinnier. What does Patrick Bateman say? You can always eat healthier. You can always be skinnier.
Yeah. And I think, well, if anything, that should sum up the entire argument is American psychos in Afghanistan.
Yes. Maybe I don't know. What should we call this one?
Well, I think we just came up with the name, American psychos.
There you go. So are we wrapping up?
I guess so.
All right. Thank you all for coming back to catch up with us, talk about my third favorite Middle East country.
Yeah. Fun fact: Sam is a UAE guy. He really likes Dubai for some reason.
I've said it before. I've said it again. This is a pro Bashar al-Assad podcast, and if you don't like it, you can leave.
Yeah. The last Baathist.
Maybe he'll be next. Do you think? I don't know. Like, all right.
Stay tuned for Afghanistan season 2.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's more like Iraq.
Give your biggest prediction for what country the U.S. will invade next.
Invade? Well, Cold War, I would say China. We've got that one set up and ready to go. We're going to have a lot of tension going with that, but that's going to be a Cold War, so we wouldn't invade North Korea. Yeah. A bunch of the countries in the Middle East are our allies, so I would say, yeah, it's Syria.
Syria does seem like the most likely, and it also seems like
Syria, or it's going to be somewhere in Africa that we haven't thought about in a very long time, and they've already been running like, I don't know, what is it? Is it Blackwater? Is that the...
Yeah. Well, they changed their name, but yeah.
Yeah. It's going to be one of those countries where Blackwater's already like operating and doing all their stuff, but then we're going to actually need like intervention there.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.